comes back to me here. How I tune a centerfire rifle versus a 22. Like I said, you can tune a 22 if you really work with it, and you might have to bed the action, glass bed it. It's not necessary to pillar bed a rimfire. Centerfire, if I'm going to bed it, I'm going to pillar bed it and glass bed it at the same time. I've got one of my guns that's the bedding, it's glued in to the stock. You can't take it out, not very easily anyway, because it's glued in there permanent. How I tune a centerfire rifle is this. That all has to do with how much powder you use. So you find out what powder is recommended and what everybody's shooting that works for them, and you try it, and you load it, shoot it at 100 yards. You're trying to get that powder to where you can get a nice group at 100 yards. Okay? Now, if you have a little bit of horizontal, off a little bit, I don't worry about that. You don't want vertical. You don't want vertical. If you're spreading the group vertically, then you either need to reduce the powder or increase the powder. Okay. Now, once I get it shooting real good at 100 yards, that isn't really good enough, because I then want to shoot it at 200 yards to see what the vertical is going to do. If I can get it at 200 yards, and I can shoot it at any range from then on, and it's tuned for that ammo. In a lot of cases, I have found that normally I have to increase the powder just a little bit to get it. But I want that round hole out there as tight as I can get it. And the reason I say don't worry so much about the horizontal is because most of the horizontal is there's something wrong in your setup, or the wind. Usually it's going to move it one way or the other this way. You want to get this as tight as you can. Rimfires, like I said, is entirely different. You go with the different shells that work in it, and then if you want to make it a little bit better, I use Wolf lately. Well, I've got a case of Ely at home that I don't know if I ever get a shot, to tell you the truth. But I'll try.
I give you.
Huh?
You shoot all mine that I give you.
You know, if you give it to me, I'll shoot it. But here's another trick that some people won't agree with this, but I'm going to guarantee you this works. He likes to shoot. He likes to shoot Midas Plus, which is made by Lupula. Well, this here is Wolf Extra Match, and it's what a lot of people here at the range shoots because it's cheaper. Well, it's not getting so cheap anymore, but it's a lot cheaper. Instead of paying $2,000 for a box of Lupula, $1,800 a case. I'm sorry, a case for Black Box Ely. This here you can get for about $800 a case.
Sorry, Bob.
So what I have found in shooting rimfire, that if I take the Wolf cheaper ammo, which is also made by Lupula, and I put that in this little doohickey here, and I measure the rim thickness on it. I can take the Lupula Midas Plus ammo, and I've done it, and check it, and I'll just be here all day checking it, and when I get done, it's a waste of time because they're so close. So the precision on that ammo is really good, where this is not, although it's made by the same guys. But if I take this ammo and I set it on here, and I check every one of them, and I get my measurements, and that's 0, 0, 0, it's pretty fine. You'll measure a hair run across there. So the point is, I separate it. I put it in 4 boxes. That's what I've done now. A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. Put them in 4 different boxes of categories. And I'll tell you what, I'd go out and shoot against his $2,000. It makes a difference. I've mentioned that to some guys and they say, well, I ain't got time to sit around and do that. Well, in wintertime, I ain't got nothing else to do. I just might as well do that. But
Some of us are still working, Bob.
yeah, I know. I know you're always working too many jobs though. So that's what I do with my 22s. You know, maybe I better look at this thing and see if
We'll talk to him about weighing the ammo.
Since you measured it, yeah.
You measured the thickness, but
Might as well
you
weigh.
might as well weigh every one of them.
you're talking about on the center fire?
On the 22
On
stuff.
the 22?
Weighing the whole.
Yeah, I've done that. Done that. Okay, if you're weighing it, if I'm gonna weigh it, I wanna know what the bullet weighs versus what the case weighs versus what the powder weighs. You cannot do that. I ain't taking it apart and put it back together again. Okay? I know people that have done that. If you wanted to go ahead and weigh it and then check your head spacing, or which does change head spacing, by the way.
You need to explain that, I think, because they don't understand the thickness of the primer on a 22 is the head space.
That's right.
And on a center fire rifle, it's the shoulder.
It's that 30-degree
Right.
shoulder.
So
Right.
you need to
That's-
explain that.
That's, well, you just did. That's what,
Mm.
that's what your head spacing is. That's what holds that case in there and support. Oh. I'm gonna, I'm supposed to start off with this here. I thought it was, but it don't matter. Sometime back, I never really got into this speed of the bullets on the 22s versus the temperature or the wind or whatever. And when I did, I thought, well, if I want to do that, I need to know the velocity where the bullet breaks the sound barrier. Well, I started off with, remember Jaeger when he broke the sound barrier in his plane? What did he say? He said, boy, just before that, I broke that sound barrier, that plane was just shaking. And as soon as he broke it, it just smoothed out. Everybody here, I think, understands that the wind affects a bullet. The longer it's in the air, the more mass it has, the more effect that the wind can have upon it. I want to read a couple. These are just like little questions that make you think of, ooh, that ain't right. Ooh, didn't know that. I'll just read some of these off. 30-06 round nose bullet, 180 grain versus 150 grain Spitzer, both at the same velocity. Which will be affected the most or the least by the wind? Wind, we'll call it drift, or when I say drift, I'm talking about the wind effect on it. Okay, so most of you get that right. But they're both going the same velocity, so that throws a little trick into that question, right? But actually, the 150 grain Spitzer will move less than the 180 grain round nose because of the aerodynamics of the bullet.
Ballistic coefficient.
Ballistics coefficients. 500 grain and a 50 grain in the air the same time, which will deflect the most? $50 grain. 500 grain at 1,000 feet per second and a 50 grain at 3,000 feet per second, which deflects the most? The slower. 500 grain is going to be affected the most by the wind. Say nothing about ballistics coefficient, because the speed sometimes overrides what is what it means. You take a 40 grain VMAX bullet, 204, at 3,900 feet per second, in a 40-mile-an-hour wind, versus a 380 grain 12 gauge shotgun at only 1,900 feet per second. Which do you think will drift the most?
Got to say the 204, because
You're right, Donnie, no. No.
The little one.
As a matter of fact,
You couldn't get
as
it.
a matter of fact, the wind drift on the 204 is only 13.6 inches, whereas that 12 gauge shotgun is 36.4 inches. Big difference. Now that would throw a lot of people. 110 grain round nose, 308, at 300 feet per second, versus a 220 grain round nose at 2,000 feet per second. These are going to be pretty close here. Well, the 308 at 3,000 will move 38.7 inches, and the 220 grain round nose at only 2,000 will move only 31 inches. So there you've got a heavier bullet going slower that actually moved 7 inches less. That kind of blew me there. I never got that right. And most people would say that each caliber's bullet, lighter bullet, each caliber with the lightest bullet will have less drift at closer range. Not necessarily. Slow, heavy, high BC, high ballistics coefficient bullet, like we just really saw a good one there, is less drift at all ranges, at longer ranges. The heavier bullet with a high BC has less drift from the muzzle out to any distance, except in a few occasions. And that is when the bullet is going 300 to 500 feet per second faster. And that would include like your 220 Swift, your 22 250. Now, the speed made up for the difference, therefore it would be less. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. When Jaeger broke the sound barrier, I was wanting to find out the speed of the bullet, where it's going to be affected by the sound barrier. I'm not interested in Jaeger's, how fast he was going, really, when I was doing this. I just wanted to try to get something to then find out what I've got to worry about when I'm shooting 22. I used to shoot pistol, indoor pistol. Not knowing even then, but everybody was shooting subsonic. They were shooting low velocity, pistol match, ammo. So was I. Well, I was only doing it because I didn't know any better. I was doing it because everybody else was doing it, but it worked. Even then, people knew that the sound barrier affected that bullet, even at that range. Hard to believe, but it's a fact. So, when he broke the sound barrier, I don't know how fast he was going. I never did get it to come out on the computer or Google or whatever, and I don't know if they do know. And the simple reason is, there is no set speed for breaking the sound barrier. Unless you know the temperature, I suppose the humidity and all this stuff might have a little bit of effect in it, but the biggest effect, the main effect, is temperature. Temperature controls how the speed of sound is going to be broken, whether it's a bullet or whether it was his airplane. So, if the temperature is 68 degrees, it's going to be 767 miles per hour, which puts the speed, which I'm interested in, at 1,125 feet per second. But if the temperature's 32 degrees, it's in the air, it's 331.2 meters a second, or 741 miles an hour, or 1,087 feet per second. That's getting back to my bullets again. I want to keep under that, especially if I'm shooting in colder weather. The hotter the temperature, the higher the temperature, the harder it is to break the speed of sound. So I'm assuming that if he's flying that plane, we know that it's going to be colder up there than down here. So I would guess that his plane was probably going, and I don't know, just over 700 miles an hour. If you're 1 mile away and somebody shoots at you, before you hear that sound, you might watch that cannon go off and see the smoke come out and the fire come out the end of the barrel, but it's going to be 4.69 seconds before you hear it. That's how sound travels. And sound travels 4 times faster in water than it does in the air. And it travels 15 times faster in steel or iron or whatever like that. So I guess, use my imagination, if I was on a pipeline and they had a pipe, and they hit that pipe, and I'm a mile away, it wouldn't take me long to hear it. It would be a lot faster. If it's 14 times faster than what you would hear it in the air.
Hey, Bob, you wanna get to the Cornelius effect?
Okay.
Now you're really gonna shake it.
Most shooters that shoot long distance, 1,000 yards. I'll tell you about most people that would understand this and know about it would probably be a sniper in the Marines, or Army, whatever, a sniper, where they're going to be taught this. They're going to be taught Mirage also, which I'll get into a little bit of Mirage, but don't ask me how to read Mirage. I can't tell you how. I know how, but I can't explain it. I'm not good enough to explain it to you. But I know 2 people. I know people who are, or at least they should be, because they were snipers in the Marine Corps, and his son was also. That maybe at another date, I will give you some facts that I do know. And right now I couldn't read Mirage other than I've got a bunch of stuff going on out there, so I could not pick up the wind on it. Mirage is you all know what Mirage is. When you're driving down the road on a real hot day and you see that going like that, it's a bubbling. And actually it's bubbling up. You'll see those waves up. Well, that's a boiling effect. But that's not the part you got to worry about. The wind is coming from one direction or whatever. When that wind's coming, it has another set of waves that are a little bit lighter and harder to distinguish than the up and down boiling you see. That's the wind. And if you're shooting and you say, okay, I got a pretty good shot there, well, I'll tell you what, if you see those little waves, that's why you always say, you shoot and then you look back at your target. I ain't looking back for my score. I'm looking back, is the wind still there? Is the mirage still there? Because normally, up comes your target, there's your score. But I look first to see if I have a mirage. Is it still the same or has it changed? That's the important thing for your next shot coming up. You know, if those waves are kind of, you just see them kind of, then you look and you better get ready, because you're going to have to add a couple of mils to your scope, or you're going to have to hold that much more off, because it's almost double the speed of it. I have a chart out there. I might be able to explain this to you better if I use that little board I've got out here. Give me a second.